Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining FSMA Friday for May. My name is Jim Albright. I'm standing in for the Aaron Balshaw, who's our super duper hashtag trending FSMA Friday moderator. He's unable to be with us today, but we're still going to have lots of fun with today's topic. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with FSMA Fridays, this is our monthly series. It's designed to educate the food and beverage facility operators or QA or safety and compliance folks on different things that we'll need to really be aware of and just be educated on, as obviously things change and shift very rapidly. So SafetyChain teams up with the Atchison Group to bring guidance and this kind of thought leadership on a bunch of different topics surrounding Food Safety Modernization Act. So we have a great presentation today. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about building supply chain control programs, but before we get into it, we just have a few program notes. As is typical, everybody's going to be on mute, but we will be doing a Q&A session. I'll be monitoring that question panel and the chat panel as well. So please do send us your questions as the presentation goes on. We're going to try to be flexible and wrap up in around 30 minutes. But if we go a little bit longer, that's okay. That just means we're having lots of fun here on FSMA Friday. But without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Liliana Casal-Wardle of the Atchison Group. Before I hand the reins over to Liliana, I will just let all of you know, yes, we are recording this, and yes, you will receive the recording later today. So I'm very excited. So Liliana, it's great to be on with you again. Welcome back to FSMA Friday.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to join you, Jim, and to join the attendees in the meeting and share some interesting topics on supply chain control.
Yes, it's really good to have you back. I know that you've done this a couple of times with us before, and we've got a lot of feedback from those sessions. And I've had the pleasure to review your slides ahead of time, obviously. And this one is something I know everybody's really going to get a lot out of. So I can't wait to hear what you got to say. So let's get it going.
Thank you. So we're going to start first with providing a small update on FSMA. And the latest thing that happened is that FDA issued a guidance for foreign supplier verification program, which the most important thing is before you used to have a symbol unknown, and now they're requiring a DUNS number, and the DUNS number is obtained on the Dun and Bradstreet website. I did put the link there, and it is this website is more designed to check financial health of companies, and there's an interest from FDA. I mean, when the financial health of a company is good, it's easier to support the programs than if the financial health is not good. So they're trying to close loops and have a better oversight of products, especially products that come from outside the US, okay? So what's going to happen is if you try to register your facility to be compliant with FDA and you don't have a DUNS number, it's going to say that your registration is not completed, it's going to be pending, and you're going to have to go to this website that you see here and register. It's very fast, and then they're going to give you a number, you upload it, and you get your registration. So now let's go to talk about the topic in question today. So the approach that FSMA has to manage food safety risks is to have a preventive approach to control them, okay? And when you look at complex products, okay, you have specific products that are run on specific lines with similar products that have similar risks. And for that purpose, you develop your food safety plan, which consists of the hazard analysis. What FDA requires is that you have a recall plan in place, and you generate different types of preventive controls, okay? If you think of HACCP is designed to be a process control model. So the food safety plan, the preventive approach to the food safety plan really is tailored to look at other risks that before were part of prerequisites, and some have been elevated to become preventive controls because of the risk that they pose. So that hazard analysis is going to tell you if you have process controls where the risk is going to be prevented in your facility. You have allergen controls, and allergens before used to be part of prerequisites for HACCP, and now is being elevated. If you have allergens in your facility, you have to treat it as a preventive control with an allergen plan that manages both the cross-contact risk and the labeling risk. You have sanitation controls, and those are also very important. FDA expects that you have a master sanitation schedule where you track your cleaning procedures and you manage your risks within that sanitation program. So if you're going to have an allergen cleaning, you have a specific allergen cleaning and you track it as an allergen cleaning. And if you're going to have a change in product and you're going to do a thorough cleaning for that, you manage to control the risk that the previous product could have left on the line for the new product. And then you have your supply chain controls, okay? And the supply chain controls are those that the supplier is really managing for you. When you look at the risks, less specific and more tailored to the site itself, you have the current GMPs, which what changed really with FSMA is that education and training are required. Okay, you have to have that, and management must ensure that food handlers are qualified. The programs that are involved in GMPs, at least the most important ones, quality control systems, employee health and employee practices, it all starts there, plant and grounds, sanitary operation, cleaning and sanitation, and environmental microbiological monitoring program, having sanitary facilities and controls, so looking at really how you manage traffic in your facilities, how you manage traffic at forklift, traffic of people to maintain sanitary conditions, how do you control traffic, how do you control exterior grounds, pest control, a sanitary design of equipment and utensils. You want to have those easy to clean, easy to access so that there's no buildup of debris that could cause food safety risks. You have processes and controls that are general to the facility. You work on raw materials, manufacturing operations, and warehousing and distribution. So the supply chain really manages all the processes that apply to the product that you're manufacturing, warehousing, and distributing. And then we have the defect action levels, which are regulatory requirements. I mean, people are not going to die if there's insect fragments, but it's very unpleasant, or rodent hairs, very, very unpleasant for the consumer, and it could really damage the brand also. So when is a supply chain control program required? You need it always. A supply chain control program is required when you have an identified hazard that requires a preventive control, but the supplier will be managing it for you. Okay, so if you are buying, for example, let's say soy, okay, and you're going to bring that soy ready to use on your line, you're not going to heat it, or you want that soy to be already commercial grade that has no risk of pathogens on that soy. So you're going to want your supplier to take care of that. So that's your supplier is going to have a preventive control for that. That is going to be the kill step to guarantee that there is no microbial load that could pose any risk to the health of the consumers. So the example that I gave is exactly what comes here: raw materials and other ingredients that are part of the supply chain controls. They must be sourced from approved suppliers. So you need to know what your suppliers are doing. You need to understand their programs based on the FSMA model that I shared on the previous slide. You look at the FSMA model, there's expectations on current GMPs, there's expectations on the food safety plan. You require from your supplier the same things you're doing for your product, okay? So when you have a need for emergency sourcing, you make sure that those suppliers that could be sourcing from unapproved suppliers put verification activities in place. They don't just say, oh, we've got to run the line, so you got to bring this product, and they say it's good. They say it's never good, okay? You have to know, you have to find out, and you have to put verification practices. You could put thorough testing. You could ask to review their food safety plans. You could check if they have been involved in any recalls. We'll talk more about that, but make sure the expectation that FDA has is you are in control of your process. They're very good with you saying what you're going to do, but you've got to do what you say you're going to do. So in your process, you're saying, I am going to control this risk by doing A, B, and C, then make sure it's always done in a way or other, okay? The facilities that do not need to have a supply chain program are those that control the hazard in their own facility, or that they don't control it there, but they're part of those suppliers that are going to sell it to somebody to control it themselves, okay? So they do not need a supply chain program. And then the model of brokers or distributors, okay, they can conduct supply verification activities, and it's always good when they do, because the more they get involved in understanding the food safety risks, the stronger is the supply chain model. But the receiver should participate in that review and should be very involved, okay? If a facility controls a hazard by their own, they do not require a supplier control program. So what is your supplier approval program? You've got to understand the risk management programs and practices, okay? So you're going to start by looking at the hazard analysis and the food safety plan. If they have an implemented GMP program, what kind of environmental monitoring program do they have to control that the facility is free of pathogens in zones 3 and 4 and there's no risk in zones 1 and 2? The cleaning and sanitation programs to make sure that if they're handling allergens, they have a good management of the risk of cross contact of allergens, or if they're handling different products that have different established pathogens of risk, that the cleaning is done correctly so that you don't have enhanced risk that you did not assess for in your food safety plan. You have to have specifications and copies of certificates of analysis. The specifications tell you what the suppliers do, how they control their risk, what are their ranges that they consider is commercial grade, and the COAs are a verification process that really they're meeting their specifications, okay? So for a new supplier, look at the trends of the COAs, compare with the specifications, and for an existing supplier, request the COAs if you can, and review them and review the trends of compliance. The suppliers are supposed to have their own supplier control program for their suppliers. So if they're doing an intermediate ingredient, if they're bringing any other ingredients to the facility, they have to have their own programs, okay? Some suppliers just process one commodity, and then that's the only supplier that they have, and they manage that as a sole supplier. Understanding the strength of the supply chain programs is understanding the history that new supplier has with managing the risk. So recalls happen, nobody is exempt, but understanding the history of recalls, how they were resolved, with what frequency, how they did they address the deviations, were there others subsequent that occurred after the first recall with the same type of root cause. Digging a little bit deeper on their documents and see how they manage incidents, if they have a good corrective action, preventive action program, and if they complete the CAPAs in a timely manner or they're pending. And the management of consumer complaints is also very important, because it's a lagging indicator that tells you really the ongoing performance in the eyes of the consumer, who at the end is the most important player. Looking at GFSI external audits, BRC, SQF, FSSC 22000 and others, and reviewing those, reviewing the non-conformities and how they were addressed. And I would add, I like to look at more than one. I like to review the most recent one. And if I find anything that makes me think, I ask them, do they have the two previous ones, to see if there is a trend where the non-conformity is identified, are those that could be repeated, and then you look at the health of the facility really. Any other regulatory audits that they could have had, very important to look at those and look at what the regulators recommended to change, and if they did it, if they had 483s, if they had warnings or any other issues with either FDA or the state departments of health. I'm sorry with this, I had closed it. Copies of the recall program, allergen management program. If they handle allergens, take a look at their program and see the strength of their program. Are they sharing the line? Do they have any risk of cross contact? Did they developed a hazard analysis of where that cross contact could occur and how they're going to handle it? How they're going to monitor that the allergen cleaning that they have established is effective? What kind of swabbing they're doing? Are they doing ATP swabbing? Are they doing allergen swabbing specific for the allergens that they handle? With what frequency? How do they verify the effectiveness of those cleaning programs? Do they do a verification with allergen swabbing once a year, every 6 months, every 3 years? Look at the strength of the allergen management. FDA is very focused on allergen management. It's the largest cause of recalls. So it's a program that requires focus, and part of the allergen management is the cross contact. The other one is the labeling. So establish a control, make sure that the supplier has a control for labeling that verifies the labels that they're using to bag the product or package the product that you're buying, that the labels are correct, and that they have a program when they change packaging materials, that they're assessing that. Okay, so look at the effectiveness of the programs. What capabilities do they have for product traceability? Okay, I think I put the recall plan a few times. It's of high concern for me. Apologies for that. And then the inspection and sampling programs for receiving and shipping. The effectiveness of the programs has to do also with your verification practices. Look at consistency. Are they really in the COAs? Are you seeing trends that could concern you? Are you seeing trends that really make you feel strongly that they have strong programs? And the last is management of internal audits. Every audit is a picture of a moment. So if you have a strong program of internal audits that also has external audits as a verification process, and has maybe regulatory audits if they happen, you can see in those internal audits, they're going to be more frequent. They're going to be maybe more focused. Some of them are tailored to go per line. Some of them are tailored to go per product. But they're usually more specific and more frequent, and they generate corrective actions. So that shows you really the overall performance of a facility when you review the internal audits for a certain period of time. So once you have your suppliers, how do you monitor your suppliers' performance? You have had this initial very long document review, and everybody tailors their document review to their programs and their needs. And then you have to focus on the performance of the supplier and change. So you review the performance by developing some integrated scorecards that you can even create with your cross-functional teams to look at the overall performance of the supplier, not only in food safety, but you can put in there the most important leading KPIs that you would like to see in those scorecards. For example, the environmental microbiological monitoring program, compliance to the preventive controls, and how do they address deviations in the preventive controls? Are they complying with the master sanitation schedule? How are they managing incidents and near misses? Do they track those? It is very important because your suppliers can be close or very far away. So the oversight and the visit might not happen as frequently as you would like. So having performance indicators that show you on a certain frequency how they're doing gives you a lot of confidence that you really have a strong program, that you do not expect big chances of failure in the near time for that supplier. Okay. And then create a team with your suppliers. Work with them to implement programs for growth and continuous improvement, such as food safety capital investment programs. Your eyes are going to be different than them when you visit them, and you're going to see things that they get used to. So you're going to see opportunities for improvement that you can share with them and provide tools to improve them, or say, maybe you can think of this area looks really lots of cracks and crevices on the wall, or the floors don't look good. You have a plan in the next year or two to refinish your floor, for example. I mean, build that relationship where you share concerns. Uh, Recognize with incentives and recognition programs for the workforce. Teach them how to recognize their workforce so that they build that loyalty on the workforce, okay, and they learn those tools. And those are tools of food safety culture that are really very effective in guaranteeing consistency of performance. Education and training is key. So sharing education models and training models where you share concerns and you share topics to build that knowledge on the workforce is always very positive. And keep in mind that education means explaining the why you're doing something, understanding why it is important, why they have to do it, versus training that is explaining the how they're doing and what is it that they're doing to deliver food safety. Okay, so don't always include education in any training module because there's more ownership when people understand the reason. And of course, empowerment of the workforce. The more the workforce feels empowered, understanding part of the solution, being able to offer any support, any ideas. So share those ideas with your suppliers and try to have them move the needle towards a strong food safety culture. In the toolbox, we have digital tools, and digital tools are always very helpful. We have a complex supply chain. It is global. There are different languages. There are many different commodities. The geographical risks are changing because of natural disasters. Economically motivated adulteration is an area of concern. So using digital tools to have agile information that can show you quickly which are your commodities of risk based on the information that you have is always helpful because the resources are always hard to find and expand in these times. I mean, we are big supporters of digital tools. I mean, I myself, I love them. We work with SafetyChain on those sometimes. We have others, and we support others that to provide food safety support to decide which is the best model. But I'm encouraging you to take a look into that, especially if your supply chain is large enough that it's going to help you have it, in 5 minutes, look at your model and tell you which are your areas of risk, okay? And which commodities are the ones that require your attention. So what are the strategies that work for effectiveness of supply chain controls, okay? Of course, involving cross-functional teams. The procurement team is the one that talks to the suppliers the most, okay? So they can lead the development of a network of preferred suppliers, and they can do that based on volume, based on importance of that ingredient, if they're a sole supplier, or create different models, but make sure that the strength of the supply chain does not depend solely on the food safety model of that supply chain, because it is more comprehensive than that. So building contracts that are not longer term creates really good partnerships and creates that that partnership that where the supplier feels committed and feels to deliver the best. The scorecard that I explained, you can build a scorecard in any way, looking at delivery times, looking at compliance with quantities, looking at, of course, in all the KPIs that I talked about of food safety and more if you want, even quality KPIs, regulatory KPIs, weight management, all those that you need to have, make them part of a scorecard and track those with them and review them and recognize them and help them solve the difficult situations when they have them. The success really relies on ongoing bilateral compliance. So both sides commit to a relationship that works, and they keep it. Enhanced communication and a program of rewards and recognition. And the rewards and recognition could be even extended contract times, better pricing models, which has nothing to do with food safety, but that scorecard of food safety is what going to lead, is what's going to drive these rewards and recognitions, okay? And you can give them weighted scores in the scorecard depending on the risk. You can have shared tools. Always make sure that you share good. So if you have good tools for training, good tools for education, good tools for continuous improvement, for food safety capital projects, share those, because learning always feels good, and that idea that you have the support of your customers makes you feel, enhance the loyalty. And you got to be ready to support each other. So keep in mind that every step of the supply chain impacts the consumers, okay? We do all this for the consumers. And if you look at the complexity of the supply chain starts at the farm level. It could be wholesalers, it could be retailers, it could be, and they're all involved in the process, and it goes through manufacturing, through logistics, retailers, and it goes to the consumer. For the consumer, food is a necessity, they need it to live, but it's also an indulgence. So that consumer's loyalty depends on the experience of the indulgence that you're going to give them. So we have to make sure that we have control of every step of the supply chain to guarantee that to the consumer on an ongoing basis. So what is food safety awareness? It's the eyes of the consumer at the end, okay? And consumers recognize the efforts to guarantee safe food, and retailers, of course, want the same thing, because they depend on the consumer's recognition to have a healthy business and to protect the health of the consumer, which is the key pillar here. We're protecting the health of the consumer. These kids that are eating ice cream, they deserve to eat ice cream 5 times a day after dinner, and always healthy, okay? The engagement and loyalty of the suppliers is strengthened by consumers' recognition towards a reliable brand. So the consumer recognizes the good brands. The consumer is aware of when there are failures in food safety, especially, and they're also, they build a little bit of fear to follow brands that don't show really strong food safety and quality standards. And these are independent of the consumer's geographical location. Foods are distributed globally. The consumers look at products and use products differently, but they all have the same eyes and they all have the same expectations on having safe food on their table every day. So with this, we're going to go to really, what does it mean to ensure regulatory compliance and consumer safety? To wrap it up, FSMA has established the criteria for the management of supply chain hazard of high severity and probability. So the supplier is supposed to have preventive controls that are managed at his level, and they must effectively control and mitigate the biological, physical, and chemical risks. They must be designed to assess the risk of food fraud also and mitigate it when it impacts food safety. Not all the food fraud incidents impact food safety, but the expectation is that you highlight those on your hazard analysis and establish if the history of economically motivated adulteration has had any impact on food safety in previous recalls, to determine the probability and severity. The ongoing effectiveness of the supply chain controls relies on the strength of the supplier approval programs, the management of emergency sourcing, and the ongoing monitoring of performance of existing suppliers. So put special attention to the program of supply chain controls. It is a regulatory requirement. It's also a best business practice. The stronger you make it, the better off for you, because it is a hard to manage risk where companies really have less resources dedicated to manage supplier risk than what they have for their own. So it is always an area of opportunity. And with this,
absolutely. Yes, thank you so much, Liliana. I'm looking at the questions coming in right now, so I think a lot of folks are pretty engaged with what they're hearing. Obviously, food safety is on everybody's mind every single day. With regulations that are shifting and changing all the time, sometimes it's hard to establish a culture of safety. I was curious, you kind of touched on this a little bit more, but even outside of the factory floor, there's needs to be a culture of food safety, and just make sure everybody's aware of it. Can you provide some insight around how you can effectively build this culture both inside and outside the plant?
Uh, what a great question. I think the most important thing to consider with building a culture is you're not building it just for the plant, okay? It starts at the top level. It starts with the leaders of the company and incorporating the values and the strength of their food safety values to the values of the company in general, and creating a culture where everybody is involved in food safety, understands why it is important, and has a role in it. Okay, so I always encourage to incorporate food safety into marketing meetings and product development meetings, and encourage them to understand what the risks are. Because if you start with the design of the product and you take it to how you're going to do it on that line, and look at all the risks and understand the severity, the probability, with the mindset of having the consumer in front of you all the time, that's where you build it, and every role has a part, okay? And that's when you build a strong food safety culture that is focused on people, focus on change, focus on being adaptable, being consistent. I mean, there's a lot of work, and FDA is pushing a lot on food safety culture. They consider that to prove effectiveness of any program, you have to have components of food safety culture. GFSI has also incorporated auditing as part of their auditing on food safety culture, and basically they're looking at the role of the managers as leaders to lead the culture, and the education and training of the employees and the empowerment that they have to understand the risks. Okay.
Yes, and Sarah just asked, where do you get started, right? There's a bunch of resources. You named a couple. Are there some key resources that you can tell the folks here to direct them to more information?
I would say that there is a GFSI position paper that was published in 2018, and that is a great starting point, because it defines the 5 dimensions of culture. From TAG, it was Dr. Rolando Gonzalez was a part of 35 members that wrote that paper together with Lone Jesperson. And if you start with that paper, you're going to see that there's 5 dimensions, and the vision and the mission is the leaders define where the company wants to go in food safety with a good vision and a good mission, but they drive it. Okay, they're part of the. It's not, they don't hand it on to somebody and say do it. They're part of the execution. Then you have the people, and the people role is the most important one, and of course education, communication, empowerment, recognition for the people, so that you bring that emotional intelligence standard where people get involved and really think it belongs to them. Okay, give them ownership of the risks of food safety to manage them correctly. And then you have consistency, which is what we want, deliver everyday good product, but also being adaptable to any changes that happen. It's all about managing change. And hazard risk and awareness. So you see the effectiveness of the culture in those trends that I talked about. So if you look for this paper, it's a GFSI position paper on food safety culture. That's a great starting point. And if you Google food safety culture, you're going to find a lot of published papers. And if you need any help, you can contact us.
That's great. Yeah. Yes, we will hunt that down, and we'll provide that link when we follow up with the webinar recording later today in the slides. I know a few of you have been asking about that. So yes, we'll provide that link as well. Thank you, Liliana. Okay, I got a question here from Joyce. Are importers responsible for verifying that their exporters are in compliance with the IA rule?
They should follow up on that. I mean, what they should follow really is a foreign supply verification program, okay, and focus on that one for importing. The IA rule has several requirements, but My recommendation is always be a little bit further ahead than just being compliant and know more. So it wouldn't hurt them to have a better in-depth assessment, because at the end of the day, they are the importers, and if by FSDP they are the importers of record, understanding the risks is always very important.
Yeah, I'm going to take one more question here. This one is quite frankly over my head. So you're the expert. I'm going to lay it on you here, Liliana. This is from Gerson. When using RTE produce without lethality step, what controls can be put into place if the produce processors don't conduct testing, nor does their environmental zone testing at low frequency and small sampling? All right, and basically the question is how can you improve supply chain controls or strengthen supply chain controls when your produce processors aren't conducting the testing in an effective way?
And that is a difficult one, because I mean, I guess my first thought would be, you call it RTE because you're telling the consumer that you took care of your risks. Okay, so if they at least don't have a control with a pre-washes or something, where they do some monitoring of the rinse water to understand if there are a level of microbial load present that could be a risk. I mean, you're telling the consumer is ready to eat. So I wouldn't feel that comfortable with a supplier that doesn't do anything to the produce and just bags it and says it's ready to eat, okay? Because it depends on how they have grown. If they grew it hydroponic and the water is controlled and it's an enclosed environment, then the risk is lower. If they grew it on the ground and in dirt, is the dirt pasteurized, for example, to not carry pathogens? If they're doing it just normal growing on a farm, then you have birds flying, you have insects, you have, I mean, worms. So you cannot say that that dirt is ready to eat. And there is going to be traces of dirt in any produce that you pick up, okay? Or fruits exposed to the environment and the air and animals. And so I would really review that program and do a little bit of a hazard analysis yourself if your supplier is not doing it, to determine what risk are you seeing. FDA has good information in the produce rule also. There's requirements now for agricultural water, which is a risk as well. So a little bit more homework on that one before feeling so comfortable about the ready to eat, okay?
Mm-hmm. I got to get one more in here from Helen. She asked a really great question that I'm personally curious about. So one more question. How can we get procurement to get engaged in our supplier program regarding food safety and quality perspectives? According to Helen, she's saying that her buyers usually ignore food safety paperwork and documentation.
I know. You're right.
Ah,
You
so
are
how
right.
do we crack that nut? Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, there's some, you can do it in a very dramatic way. Okay, I mean, you can pick up the last 3 recalls and show them how much they cost, and if they were cost by suppliers, they could have done different. And usually, the financial impact of a recall is a great starting point for the businesses to look at more proactive approaches. Okay, the consumer health, and if those recalls have been unfortunately issues with consumers' health, that is an even bigger driver, because of course nobody wants to hurt people, but you have to think also of the side effects, the impact to the brand that they're supporting. So show them really, the mindset is usually that food safety and quality are the expensive part of the process, okay? And it is true, because it is expensive to have the resources to build the places to meet the standards, but at the end of the day, it pays back, because as it delivers consistent, safe food, you save a lot of money in a management of incidents and potential incidents that could be as serious as a recall one. So the approach should be having
Mm-hmm.
a conversation of what does it take to be proactive and more cost effective, and even the smaller approach of, if I have better products that I have more control, even on quality standards, particle size, moisture, that perform better on the lines, they're going to have less rework. So it's going to be a more cost effective product without thinking of food safety. So make it a proactive approach and put on the table everything that you know, and try to drive them to change. And the other important thing is make them think that whatever they buy, their family is going to be eating. So it should be very
Oh, yes. Make it very real. Yeah, I love it. Thank you
very
so
real
much,
and very
Dr. Liliana. Yes, indeed. So we're going to wrap it up here. Liliana, thank you. This was amazing. Again, we will be sharing this deck. We will also be sharing the link to the GFSI document you referenced, and also the recording. So please stay tuned to that. Liliana, if we can have you again on FSMA Friday, I think every day would be a holiday. Because number one, you said we can eat ice cream 5 days a week, so I'm all about that. Yes, we'll keep it healthy though. But hey, if you need any other information, please check out the Epson Group. They're a great partner of SafetyChain. They have so many different resources that you can learn from. And obviously, we'll continue our FSMA Friday journey together next month. And if you like some reading for the long weekend ahead, please download our Mitigating Labor Shortages with Plant Management Software guide. It is filled with examples, real-life examples of ways that you can reduce risk and increase operational efficiency. It's really great. So check it out. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Liliana. This has been tons of fun. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to work with SafetyChain. Thank you. Thanks to all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.